Hello and good morning. My name is Matt Reardon. I'm subbing in for Eric this morning, who is out for some travel. I just wanted to start here. This is a satellite image looking down on the evening of September 25th. This was last Wednesday, roughly 24 to 36 hours before Hurricane Helene would make landfall eventually in the Big Bend area of Florida. And I'll just kind of circle that area here. Now, Hurricane Helene is on this image. You can see it down here in the far southeast Gulf of Mexico before it would eventually strengthen. But you can also make out some other things on this map. You can see all the municipalities across the southeast U.S. You can see the coastline, of course, here. In that same way, of course, there's Atlanta, South Carolina, and then further to the west, some of the Gulf states there. Now, I'm going to show you the next image. It's the same geography looking down just 3 days later after Hurricane Helene made landfall. And wow, just look at the difference in some of the lights that you can see here from space. The impacts from Helene, both the wind and some of the heavy rain, just apparent even from space, and the reduced lights due to the power outages across parts of the southeast. Again, I'll kind of flip back and forth here. And just representative, I think, of the unfortunate devastation that we've seen across the southeast. I think, in the weekend after, immediately following the impacts of the storm, and now the first few days this week, it's really becoming more clear the total level of impact, both life and property, that folks are dealing with, particularly in southern Appalachia. And of course, our hearts and prayers go out to them. In thinking about this event, I think it's kind of a reminder of some important lessons, both in meteorology, perhaps ag, and some other respects here. I wanted to come to this image here. It's a historical rainfall map. Now, it's based on the morning of September 26th, so Hurricane Helene wouldn't make landfall for at least another 12 hours after this. The data was analyzed here for this map, and what it's showing is the 3-day rainfall totals across kind of the southeast corner of the U.S. here, before kind of 12 hours before Helene even made its way up into the southeast. And what you see here is a lot of rain. Initially, parts of Georgia, 2 to 4 inches of rain, maybe even getting up close to 5 inches in parts of central and eastern Georgia here, parts of western Florida and the Panhandle receiving quite a bit of rain in the lead up to Hurricane Helene. But my eye is drawn here. If you look at the southern portions of the Appalachians, which are some of the highest elevations here, you're looking at anywhere from 3, 5, 7, pushing up toward 8 or 9 inches of rainfall. This is before Helene. And this is one of these kind of unfortunate precursor or preconditioning events that we often see in these big disasters. It's never just one thing. It's kind of a combination of unfortunate factors that end up producing, the level of devastation. And unfortunately, you can see that here. There was a frontal system draped across the eastern U.S. at the time that was helping to coalesce against some of the moisture that Helene was pushing up into the southeast. So we were dumping rain on an area before, unfortunately, we added another 10 to 15 inches in just a 24-hour period after Helene came above those Appalachian Mountains. So, a terrible occurrence here. Again, there's lessons here in so many different ways. We look for these kind of series of events that need to unfold. In fact, if you just listen to Eric's videos over the last kind of 3 days, he will walk through what needs to happen for X or Y weather event to occur. And that just helps us kind of plan for the different kind of probabilities and the risk assessments that we need to do in agriculture and meteorology. Just a totally opposite example here. Rather than too much rain, a lack of rain. This is looking at the drought monitor map across the United States in fall of 2011. And here we had significant extreme drought in parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, starting to push up into Arkansas, even working its way into the upper Mississippi River Valley in fall, going into the winter of 11 and 12. Now, the winter that we did end up having that year in the central U.S., particularly the upper Midwest, was pretty mild. We had warmer temperatures and we had less snowpack. And what you're kind of seeing here is there's these culmination of events that unfortunately ended up leading to the central U.S. drought of 2012. It wasn't like the rain just stopped on May 1st. It was these series of events these preconditioning events, or these things that had to be checked first before the disaster really began to unfold in earnest. So keep that in the back of your mind. We'll talk about the winter forecast here, not drawing any parallels between, I think, what we're seeing now in terms of the drought that's developing across parts of the U.S. here this fall with 2012. But nonetheless, it's at least a little concerning, right? Because you're walking across now some of those check boxes that need to get made before we enter into a new growing season. So just something to keep in mind as we go forward. I can think of a totally different example here, yet still relevant for meteorology in the southeast. The tornado outbreak, the super outbreak in 2011, April that month, one of the worst in U.S. history. Anybody who lives in the southeast usually has a story or a personal anecdote from it, unfortunately. Top 2 tornado outbreak in U.S. history. You could argue number 1, devastating impacts here. That was April 27th. What a lot of people forget, and understandably so, is that the day before this was also a near historic tornado outbreak. So these are all the storm reports and the tornado reports from the worst of the 2, April 27th, the number 2 event in U.S. history. But if I just take you back to April 26th, one day before, see all the tornado reports we had here, again, across the southeast, across parts of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, the hail reports and the wind reports stretching up into parts of the Mid-South as well. Now, unlike drought, which can beget more drought, and unlike getting a lot of rainfall before you get a lot of rainfall, tornadoes, they're not going to help. Just because you've been hit by a tornado doesn't necessarily make you more likely to be hit by another one, but there is a different kind of preconditioning here happening. And what we had, unfortunately, in that last week of April in 2011 was this big upper level trough centered across the central U.S., and it was pumping these storm systems up out of Texas, out of what we call kind of that Ark-La-Tex area, that is Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas. And these were helping to funnel more moisture up from the Gulf of Mexico into the southeast. So by the time the system associated with the April 27th event came through, it had plenty of moisture. There had been rainfall on this area, very high dew points, which are something we are concerned about anytime we have a precursor to a large tornado outbreak. And unfortunately, we saw it to fruition on April 27th. So it's never, some of these biggest weather concerns and disasters are never these kind of one-time things that happen out of the blue. There is a lead up to them, and it's kind of our job to figure out what that lead up is going to look like and convey that. Now, I'll just kind of start at the seasonal forecast here to kind of ease some concerns. Of course, I talked about the mild winter that we had in 11 going into 12. Well, if I just pull up the latest Climate Prediction Center forecast for this winter, not necessarily the expectation right now, and this looks pretty La Nina-y going into the 24-25 winter. So mild to below average temperatures across the northern portions of the U.S. and the upper Midwest, warmer to the south. Again, this looks pretty La Nina-y. That makes sense. We're going into a likely weak to moderate La Nina this year. If we look at the precipitation, obviously a large component of that. Well, if we have average to below average winter temperatures and the slightly above average precipitation forecast here for the upper Midwest, perhaps even a little bit more so here in the central and eastern Corn Belt, that likely helps us get down something of a more healthier snowpack than we had in 11 and 12. Now, of course, this is a seasonal long-range forecast. These are not gospel, and we've seen these missed before. But at the very least, we've checked this kind of one concerning box going into the 25 growing season. Let's just not check this next box, right? Let's not check this next preconditioning event here going into this winter. That would end up making drought a much bigger concern next year. If we get the rains, we get the mild temperatures, or I should say the more proper cold temperatures, and get some snowpack down, that would give us a little bit further away from being concerned about the growing season next year. Okay, I want to jump to current weather right here. This is the current temperatures as of this morning when I'm recording this video here just after sunrise. Some cold temperatures have finally come through the Corn Belt. We've seen a stretch of warmer temperatures here. We had a cold front come through Tuesday morning, now pushing off into the eastern U.S., and finally bringing some temperatures down here into the low 40s across parts of Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, even a freezing popping up here in the valleys of western Wisconsin, but warming up behind that quickly with some of the sun that we're expecting here in parts of the northern plains. If we just jump over and look at the current NOAA All Hazards map, we can see some heat advisories and warnings here for parts of California, the Central Valley, including some of coastal California, with temperatures expected to get up into the high 80s. Relatively rare for areas along the coast, and then coming over into the lower Colorado River Valley as well. I want to jump over and show you the upper level height map that we're seeing here this morning on Wednesday. This little piece here, that is the cold front that's moved through. That's now pushing out of the area, and it's being replaced by a ridge here today on Wednesday, October 2nd. Now, if I take this forecast forward into Wednesday evening, and then into Thursday, you can see ridging over parts of California, Nevada, Utah. That's why we have those warmer temperature advisories there, the heat advisories and the warnings. but then ridging over parts of the eastern U.S., so warming up very quickly after the cold front. So we have the cold temperatures here this morning across the Midwest, expecting those to warm up as we go through the week here into Friday. And then Saturday, as we get more proper ridging building over the central U.S. So temperatures warming up all the while in parts of the central U.S. We have another little system sneaking through here in the northern Rockies. That is going to be the next kind of question mark that we watch going through the weekend, because you can see that trough as it comes off Montana, pushes into the upper Midwest. And there's been some disagreements in the models here. This is the ECMWF model now, out through Sunday, October 6th. Some of these a little bit earlier had this trough diving more all the way through the southeast. That would bring even further cold temperatures down into the Midwest, and the Ohio River Valley, into the eastern Corn Belt, certainly the Northeast. Some of these latest forecasts here from ECMWF, now Monday into October 7th, certainly a potent trough here moving through parts of the Northeast, but not diving quite as far south as maybe some of the earlier model runs. So certainly a cold weather maker, a cold front coming through at the end of the weekend into Monday of next week, likely to bring temperatures down really across the whole eastern half of the country, and a ridge quickly following behind that in a very kind of persistent pattern that we've seen. So taking this European model forecast all the way out through mid-October now, this is October 10th of next week on Thursday, we can see a very familiar pattern. Dominant ridge over the central U.S., warm temperatures, very likely over parts of the northern plains, the central plains, parts of the central and western Corn Belt, with this trough now positioned south of Alaska. And it's kind of a similar pattern that we've seen here recently, keeping warmth, keeping dry weather in the central U.S., and that's likely to continue as we go forward here into next week. If we kind of break the temperature forecast down day by day, these are the high temperatures forecast for today with our anomaly color kind of overlaid here. So you can see the influence of that recent cold front that's moving through the eastern U.S., some cooler temperatures here across the central eastern Corn Belt, the mid-south, parts of the Ohio River Valley. The warmer temperatures certainly expected for parts of California under those heat advisories and those heat warnings, and then quickly warming up again on the backside of this cold front here in the northern plains with some more sun getting in to the central and northern plains. If we go through the day Thursday and then Friday, still again pretty mild, above average here for parts of the central and eastern U.S. as the influence of that cold front has now left and is over the Atlantic Ocean. We see more ridging pushing in on Saturday that we talked about, warm temperatures there across the central U.S. And then Sunday, we finally get that trough pushing out into the upper Midwest, and that's going to slowly make its way toward the northeast as we go Sunday, Monday into Tuesday. Now this map ends. The forecast ends here, I think, Monday. It gets all the way to Tuesday. So you can see those colder temperatures now. And again, these are high temperatures pushing all the way through, again, the eastern third of the country. But we're all the way out here Tuesday, October 8th now. And we talked about that big dominant ridge coming in on the backside. So you can see those temperatures quickly warming up here in the western U.S. early next week. If we look at minimum temperatures over that same time period, again, no huge freezing concerns this morning across the central U.S., but temperatures down into the 40s, save for that one observation that we did see in Wisconsin. Tomorrow, less or so. Can't rule out Friday morning, some frost in parts of the upper Midwest. Some of these cooler temperatures getting down into the mid to low 30s. And then Saturday evening, warming up on the northern plains Sunday, and then not feeling the effects of that next trough until Monday morning, October 10th, with temperatures dropping back down into the upper 30s across parts of the Midwest, potentially low 40s to mid 40s across parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, these same temperatures shifting east. If I look a little bit closer at those temperatures with a different model here, this is the national blend of models. I'm going to take this out to Monday morning, and this showcases that middle to upper 30s here across Minnesota, parts of northern Wisconsin, into the mid 40s here across parts of the central Corn Belt. On Tuesday, similar story going forward, but now spreading east into Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia, all the way over to the Atlantic coast now, New York getting down into the lower 40s. Wednesday, similar story, and then finally warming up as that ridge begins to dominate across the central U.S. later in the week here. Again, you don't see any huge kind of freeze concerns, at least here for the early part of October, save for some northern reaches of Wisconsin and Minnesota. We jump over here and look at the Climate Prediction Center outlook for week 2. That is October 9th through the 15th, so getting almost out into next weekend now. With that dominant ridge showing up in the ECMWF forecast, not a surprise here, right, to see this large area of above average temperatures expected for the middle of October. Again, we've just seen that's been a very persistent forecast at this point. There's kind of influence from La Nina that we expected here and this is just a high confidence forecast for warmer temperatures going through the middle of the month, at least for the central U.S., but for even parts of the western U.S., and the influence of that cold front that we talked about coming through on Monday showing up here, I think, in the eastern U.S. Precipitation-wise, I think more of the same. This dry stretch is going to continue, save for parts of Florida. We're going to talk about why that is here in just a second. You might surmise that it has to do with some tropical activity, but as far as the central U.S. is concerned, we're talking about a serious lack of measurable precipitation now as we continue to watch drought develop across some of the areas here that missed out on the rainfall over the last kind of week or two. I want to jump over quickly and talk about the tropics here. Looking down on the Atlantic Basin, you can see the eastern U.S. on the top left corner of this image. There's two things quickly I'll discuss here. One is Hurricane Kirk, which formed over the last 24 hours. That is in the way eastern Pacific, or Atlantic, I should say. Category 1 storm this morning. If you look at it, can't quite make out an eye here, maybe just kind of briefly trying to form one here. Does not look like the healthiest storm, but this is expected to strengthen over the next 2 days into a major hurricane. That is the forecast from the National Hurricane Center. But we've had this strong Bermuda high here. In fact, you can see it kind of centered right here off the west coast of Africa. But it's been stronger and more east than we typically expect. And you might have guessed that because Bermuda is way over here in the western Atlantic. So this high pressure system is going to help funnel Kirk up toward the north, where it's going to be what we call a fish storm. Not a concern right now to land. But nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see how quickly that develops, given how it looks right now. The other area of concern here is this kind of blob of shower and thunderstorm activity across Central America. We've talked about these here this month. This is a kind of burgeoning Central America gyre. It's this area of low-level pressure anomalies over Central America, and these can spin up storm systems. In fact, Helene developed as kind of a development from one of these Central American gyres here. And the concern here going into this weekend is we could see the development of another storm system potentially in the Gulf of Mexico as a result of this. Now, that sounds concerning, right, because I compared it to Helene, but most of the forecasts right now taking a long time to develop this system. When it does kind of coalesce into the Gulf of Mexico, it's not looking too threatening right now, except potentially as a gusty wind and rainmaker for parts of Florida. If we jump over and look at the forecast here from the ECMWF, this is looking at low-level spin in the atmosphere, and it's a good forecast to look at in terms of kind of capture where this hurricane might develop in the days ahead. So I take this through Wednesday, October 2nd, Thursday, October 3rd. You can see kind of a broad area of low pressure system and spin here across parts of southern Mexico and Central America, potentially developing a tropical storm here in the eastern Pacific. And as I take this forward, again, maybe a little spin up here in the Bay of Campeche in the southern Gulf of Mexico, a little pressure trough here, nothing too imminently concerning in terms of hurricane development. This is now out into the afternoon of Sunday, October 6th. And we kind of have this broad area of low pressure here, almost centered all the way across the Gulf of Mexico. That is, too broad to develop anything quickly in terms of tropical storm or a hurricane. But by Monday, 24 hours later, you can see it tightening up a little bit. So Sunday, if I go backwards, you can see a broad circulation here, not too well defined. Now it's starting to try to tighten a little bit, maybe even pinch off into two separate circulations here. But the timing works out pretty well, I think, for the eastern U.S., at least in terms of a concerning landfall. Because if you remember from the forecast that I just gave you, by Monday and Tuesday of next week, that cold front, it's coming down through the eastern U.S. at this point, and that's associated with an upper-level trough. Troughs and hurricanes don't get along too well when they interact, and this is going to help quickly punt any kind of developing system quickly to the east out of the Gulf of Mexico. And if you actually watch, you can see it gets grabbed very quickly by the trough that's moving through, yanks it across Florida, where you're likely to see some heavier precipitation, potentially some gusty winds, if it were to develop a concise circulation here as like a tropical storm. But just not seeing that in a number of the different models run here. This is just one forecast from the ECMWF, but the GFS in good agreement there. So looking at the potential development of a storm kind of over this weekend in the Gulf of Mexico, if it develops a little bit quicker than we expect, could become a little bit more concerning for Florida, but right now not a huge newsmaker as our thinking going forward. And there's that trough on Monday, October 7th. So any system kind of developing here is quickly going to be under the influence of that upper level trough, which is going to steer it out east into the Atlantic before it can develop significantly. Again, one kind of impact of that would be increased precipitation across parts of Florida. Again, you can see rainfall amounts in the 7-day forecast here going out to Tuesday, October 8th, and the 2 to 5 inches rain for Florida. So, can't rule out some flooding concerns here, but I think the wind threat would be pretty low, again, barring some kind of earlier and more significant development. The National Hurricane Center only has a 40% chance of tropical storm formation here in the Gulf of Mexico as we go through the weekend. So even the question is, will we have a storm to talk about is not set in stone right now. I think regardless of whether a tropical storm forms or not, Florida likely to receive more significant rainfall from this. But again, not something as concerning as Helene was at the same time in its forecast. So to finish up here, wanted to cover South America quickly. I know Eric's been keeping an eye on this over the last kind of 48 hours, just watching and waiting for some of the monsoonal rains into parts of central and western Brazil. We talked about, this week the precipitable water anomaly and where that has been and how that's going to develop over the next 7 days. Just wanted to give you an update on the new models that have come in over the evening. This one from the ECMWF. We talked about this kind of persistent area of dryness in the upper atmosphere here in parts of eastern Brazil and how that will develop. I'll just quickly take this forecast forward through the next week to 10 days. And you can see that area of dryness here, again, parked across central and eastern Brazil. To take it out into next week, if you watch closely, you can see kind of a high pressure system. It's hard to tell here. A high pressure system starting to strengthen here over the southern Atlantic. You can see this low pressure system spinning here off the coast, the west coast of South America. And that's helping to bring some more moisture in from the tropical Atlantic into central Brazil, at least through the middle part of next week. You can see that here from the ECMWF. The GFS looks fairly similar to that right now. And as you might expect, if we take a 5-day rolling anomaly of precipitation for central Brazil, dry through the next 5 days, that makes sense, as we haven't seen a big change in that forecast here. But as I take this into the middle of next week, you can start to see at least an early kind of indication of maybe some more rainfall, thunderstorm, and the lighter monsoon activity starting to push in now to central and western Brazil. It's not this kind of wholesale open the floodgates sort of thing, but at least kind of the beginnings of a potential monsoon here. Now, again, not the kind of biggest signal. It's something to watch, but at least some of the ingredients that we watch for this to get going are starting to come together with that high pressure system here and that low pressure system off the coast of South America going into the middle of October here. If I jump out and look at the GFS forecast kind of over that same time period, again, I'll start it here. This is the next 5-day rolling precipitation anomaly, dry across central and southern Brazil. As I take that forecast forward into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, now Thursday of next week. Again, right, not opening the floodgates here, but definitely seeing some an uptick in that monsoon activity. Again, still on that same story, still kind of on that same track that we were expecting with the forecast earlier this week, seems to be playing out next week for South America. That's the last slide I have for you all. Thank you for listening, and Eric will be back with you all tomorrow on Thursday morning.